What do you do when grief and loss turn into the battle of your life? My name is Emily, and this is the story of how I found myself fighting for my home, my future, and my family not once, but twice. After losing my husband Paul to a tragic accident, I thought the worst was behind me. But when my mother-in-law, Karen, and sister-in-law, Brittany, showed up uninvited at my doorstep, I realized that the true fight for my peace was just beginning. Stay tuned to hear how I took a stand, rediscovered my strength, and found hope in the midst of chaos. Subscribe to follow my journey of resilience and find out how, sometimes, the most unexpected challenges lead to the most powerful transformations. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how my life was turned upside down. Not just once, but twice. To understand how, I need to start from the beginning. I was born in a small suburban town to loving parents, Robert and Linda David. My father was a journalist and my mother worked as a nurse. While we were never wealthy, we were happy. Life felt normal until I was 14, and then everything changed. One rainy Friday night, my parents were driving home from a dinner party. My grandmother and I were watching a silly cartoon at home when the phone rang. The sound of my grandmother sobbing in the kitchen will forever haunt me. The following days were a blur. We were told that my mother had died instantly in a car crash. My father nearly didn't survive. When I finally saw him in the hospital, he was unrecognizable, his body battered and broken. The doctors said his legs were crushed, and he would never walk again. He whispered to me, "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'm so sorry," as he reached for my hand. I didn't understand why he was apologizing. It wasn't his fault. But as time went on, I learned that their car had been hit by an intoxicated driver. I realized that his apologies were for the struggles ahead, the death of my mother, and for the kind of father he thought he could no longer be. But my father, Robert David, was more resilient than he gave himself credit for. After leaving the hospital and adjusting to life in a wheelchair, he threw himself into his work. Though he had always been a gifted writer, he poured everything he had into his role as an editor at the city's largest newspaper. As I entered adolescence, Dad made sure I had everything I needed. He encouraged me to join clubs, make friends, and try to lead as normal a life as possible. We spent time together watching old movies, discussing books, and him helping me with my homework. When college approached, Dad insisted I attend school away from home. "I'll be fine, kiddo. Don't worry about me. You need to spread your wings." I hesitated, but he was right. So, I left for college, studying accounting at the State University of New York. It was there I met Ashley, my best friend. Through her, I met her second cousin, Paul. He was kind, funny, and didn't bat an eye when I shared the story of my dad with him. In fact, Paul and my dad hit it off right away, especially since they both shared a love for classic rock. Later, Paul told me, "Your dad is cool, and you've done a great job taking care of him over the years." I tried to hide my smile, feeling proud but a little shy. For the first time since the accident, I believed that maybe I could have a normal life, one filled with love, laughter, and even a family of my own. After graduation, Paul started driving long-distance trucks, and I began working at the local tax office. We dated for 4 years, and then one chilly fall evening in the park where we had our first date, he proposed. I was overjoyed, but I needed to make something clear. "Paul, I can't leave my father. He needs me." Paul grinned, his smile wide and sincere. "I wouldn't have it any other way. We'll all live together. Your apartment can accommodate the 3 of us, right?" It felt like everything was finally coming together, that maybe I could build the life I had always dreamed of. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was starting to thrive. It was a simple but beautiful wedding. Dad insisted on rolling himself down the aisle to give me away. There wasn't a dry eye in sight. As I stood there holding Paul's hand, I felt like I was living out a fairy tale. But there are enemies in every story, and for me, they were my mother-in-law, Karen, and sister-in-law, Brittany. From the moment I met them, I could tell they didn't like me. "Which is why your father is disabled," Karen said when we first met. Her nose furrowed as though she had smelled something disagreeable. "He has a disability." "He's an editor," I corrected him while trying to keep my cool. "How considerate of her to interrupt. She is clearly not interested." Then she turned to Paul and asked, "Are you sure of this? Many beautiful women from respectable households are present." Paul immediately defended me, even though my face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Emily's mother is from a respectable family. Her dad's infirmity doesn't change that." I could still see Karen's discontent in her eyes, even after I told her that all that mattered was that I loved her. Brittany was as distant from me after the wedding as her mother had been. Just as promised, we settled into a pattern once Paul moved in with Dad and me. I would work in the tax office for days at a time while Paul was traveling. We used to have dinner together when he got home, but when Karen and Brittany visited, the mood in our home shifted. They barely recognized Dad's presence and acted as though they were in control of everything. "What if they become parents?" I once overheard Karen whispering to Brittany. "It's unfortunate that Paul is stuck with this girl and her disabled father when he could have done so much better. Can you visualize the genes?" I was furious, but I kept quiet for Paul's sake. It was getting harder and harder for me to keep the peace. One night, after the very unpleasant interaction between Karen and Brittany, I burst into tears in our bedroom. Paul found me crying. Hey. He drew me into his embrace and said, "What's the matter, mother and sister?" I sobbed. "They hate me. They think I am unworthy of you because of Dad." Paul's face became grim. "That's ridiculous. You and your father are now family to me. If they can't accept that, that's their problem, not ours." His words gave me comfort, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our issues with Karen and Brittany were just beginning. Paul's trucking business began to grow as the months went by. He drove his big rig all across the country and was never off the road. During his absence, I focused on my work at the tax office and spent my evenings with my father. Despite the fact that I missed him a lot, one crisp autumn evening I was helping Dad get into bed. Paul's voice crackled with excitement over the phone. He went on, "I've been thinking, Emily. How do you feel about buying a townhouse? In a wheelchair, your dad might move about more effortlessly. He should spend more time outside. You might also have a garden, which would keep you busy while I'm away." The more he talked about it, the more I liked the idea. Dad was trying to cover his ears when I looked at him. "What do you think, Dad?" I asked. The speaker on the phone is turned on. Dad's eyes shone brightly. "It would be easier to get outside than settle it, and a garden would be nice," he stated. Over the next 2 weeks, we threw ourselves into the house hunting process. Finally, we found the perfect spot, a large townhouse with spacious doors, a beautiful backyard, and a roll-in shower for Dad. We made it work with Paul's income, my own, and the rent from Dad's old flat. The idea of taking on a mortgage was terrifying, but we managed to make it happen. On a sunny spring Sunday, we moved in. I'll never forget Dad's face when he pushed himself onto our new patio. "This is perfect, my dear." "Oh," he said, with a distant look in his eyes. "Thank you." The next few months were spent settling in and making the space our own. While I tended to a small vegetable garden, Dad would spend hours outside enjoying the sunshine and fresh air. It was calm, peaceful, and almost perfect. We decided to host a housewarming party to celebrate our new beginning. We invited our friends, colleagues, and even Karen and Brittany. The party was in full swing when they arrived, fashionably late and with their jealousy barely concealed. As we moved through the house, I noticed Karen eyeing everything carefully. When we reached the main bedroom, she gave me a sly smile. "You know, Emily, Paul and I would love this," she said quietly. "Consider placing your father in a nursing home before I move in here." I felt as though I had been slapped. "I'm sorry," I managed to say, still stunned. Karen wasn't done. "Don't act so shocked. Your father's health is failing, isn't it? He doesn't need this luxury. An assisted living facility would be more than enough for someone in his condition." Before I could respond, Karen walked out, leaving me standing there in disbelief. Dad was sitting on the patio talking to some guests. To my horror, Karen grabbed the handlebars of his wheelchair and started pushing him toward the driveway. "Karen!" I shouted, rushing after her. "What are you doing? If he doesn't want to go to a nursing home, he stays outside, not you!" I was trembling with anger and disbelief. Thank goodness Paul heard the commotion and rushed over. "Mom!" he said, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell are you doing? Let go of Robert's chair right now!" Karen looked taken aback by Paul's tone. Honey, I don't want to hear it. Paul cut her off. You and Brittany need to leave, now! After the incident, Dad and I left, and Paul apologized over and over. I had no idea she would say that. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I reached out and touched Paul's hand gently. Son, it's not your fault. Some people just don't get it. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. I didn't mind Karen and Brittany keeping their distance, and Paul focused more on his career, taking longer trips to help with the mortgage. I split my time between taking care of Dad, maintaining the house, and working at the tax office. The next 4 years flew by, and life became comfortable and routine. Though Paul spent much of his time traveling, our small family enjoyed the moments when he was home. Dad seemed content, spending his days in the garden or working from home. His health remained stable. Then came the call that shattered my world. I was at work when my phone rang and a voice I didn't recognize came through. Highway Patrol Officer Andrew, Mrs. Walker? My heart sank. Yes, I said, my voice shaky. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but your husband, Paul Walker, was involved in a tragic accident. Words like head-on collision rang through my head, but everything else was a blur. I thanked the officer robotically, and it wasn't until I hung up that reality set in. Paul was gone. The next week was a haze of grief and disbelief. I went through the funeral planning like a shell of myself. The day before the funeral, I mustered the courage to call Karen. I didn't want her to find out from the obituary in the paper. Hello? Karen's sharp voice came through the phone. It's Emily. Karen, I said, my voice trembling. I need to tell you about Paul. He's gone. There was an accident. There was silence on the other end of the phone, and then, much to my surprise, Karen's irate voice returned. You're to blame, she snarled. You made him drive that truck to pay for your fancy house. You killed my son. I was shocked. Karen, don't save it. She lost her temper. I'm counting on you to give him the best funeral possible, but don't count on us for anything now. Lie in the bed you made. The line died. I was crying as I stood there with foam in my palm. It was gloomy and gray on the day of Paul's burial, which was exactly how I felt. The church was full. Following the service, it seemed that half the town had come to pay their respects, indicating how well liked Paul was in the community. I noticed that Paul's mother and sister weren't even bothered to attend the funeral for their own brother and son. We're family, sweetie, and we'll figure this out together. Something didn't feel right as we pulled into our driveway. I was positive that I had turned off everything before we left, so I asked, Were any lights left on? He shook his head no. As we got closer, I noticed movement inside the house, and my heart raced. When Paul was being buried, were we being robbed? I quickly helped Dad into his wheelchair after he got out of the car. Should I call the police? My mind is racing. But as we got closer to the front door, I recognized the voices. The recognition sent a chill down my spine. Karen and Brittany were standing in the middle of our living room, surrounded by boxes and furniture. When I opened the door, I could barely hold back my shock. What is going on here? I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. I was struggling to contain my grief in the face of this awful intrusion. Karen turned toward me, her face masked with a fake look of sympathy. Oh, Emily, sweetheart, we're just helping you pack. You can't possibly keep this place after all. Paul is no longer with us. I was speechless. Don't worry, Brittany added in her sickeningly sweet voice. Go back to your father's apartment, please. It's comfortable there. The anger bubbled up inside me. I clenched my fists. Go, I said in a low, menacing voice. Go from my house right now. Karen dared to act offended. Paul's entire estate is now ours, including this house, she snapped. You don't have any say in this. My anger exploded. Where were you at his funeral today, huh? That's right, you didn't care enough to show up and be a decent person. And now you want to take everything. You're unbelievable! I couldn't hold back anymore. The audacity of their actions was beyond me. They had never shed a single tear for Paul, and here they were trying to evict me from the home we had built together. I'm calling the police, I said, my voice steady and resolute as I pulled out my phone. Brittany and Karen exchanged a nervous glance, clearly not expecting me to fight back. "You should leave now," I said, my tone icy. Something in my voice, maybe the fire in my eyes, seemed to make them realize they had crossed a line. Karen turned to me, frowning, and as she backed up, she muttered, "Emily, this isn't over. You'll hear from our attorneys." The days that followed Paul's funeral were a blur of paperwork, anxiety, and sorrow. Every day I had to deal with their interference, their attempts to take what wasn't theirs. I kept reminding myself, this is my home. Paul and I bought it together. They don't have the right to be here. Despite the chaos, I focused on sorting out Paul's affairs, partly to keep myself busy, and partly out of fear that Karen and Brittany would take more from us. A week after the funeral, I received a call from a small law firm. My heart raced in my chest as I picked up the phone, terrified that Karen had started pursuing legal action. "Mrs. Walker?" a clear, professional voice asked. "This is Scott Thompson from Thompson and Partners. I'm calling regarding your late husband's will." A flicker of hope sparked within me. His will? I didn't know he had one. "Yes, ma'am," Mr. Thompson continued. "About 5 months ago, Mr. Walker came to see us and requested that we contact you in case of his passing. I've set an appointment for tomorrow." Confusion and worry washed over me. Why hadn't Paul mentioned this? What had he meant? The next morning, I took Dad with me to Mr. Thompson's office. The lawyer greeted us with kind eyes and a warm handshake. "Mrs. Walker, I'm sorry for your loss. Mr. David, welcome." He gestured for us to sit down. Mr. Thompson opened a file on his desk, and I held my breath as he began to read aloud. "I, Paul Walker, being of sound mind, give my beloved wife all of my material possessions. This includes our house, our truck, and all of our savings. I hope that Emily and her father, Robert David, use these resources to care for themselves as I would have done." Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized what Paul had done. He had provided for us, even in his absence. "Mr. Walker also left you a letter," Mr. Thompson added, his hands shaking as he handed me an envelope. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter read, "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, please know that you and Dad have been the best things that ever happened to me. I'm so sorry for leaving you both. I knew how my mother and sister could behave, so I made sure you two would be taken care of. Please don't worry about them. You and Dad are my true family. Always look out for one another and enjoy life. I will always be watching over you, my love. Paul." As I finished reading, I couldn't help but cry. Paul had known the struggles we would face and had set things in motion to protect us. It wasn't just about material things, it was his way of ensuring that we had the strength and resources to move forward, even without him. I sobbed as I held the letter close to my chest. Dad was also crying as he patted my arm with his aged hand. I looked up, sniffing, and asked what that meant. "Mrs. Walker, there's one more thing." Mr. Thompson hesitated before continuing. "Your husband had insurance on his truck. The whole policy amount will be paid out by the insurance carrier owing to the accident's conditions. It means you'll be receiving a large sum of money enough to pay off your mortgage and more," Mr. Thompson added with a slight smile. As we left the lawyer's office, I felt as though a burden had been lifted. Paul had taken care of that. When we got to our driveway, I saw a car I recognized on the street, and my heart sank when I recognized Karen's appearance. "Oh, no, Sin." Now, I muttered, "What?" Yes, Karen and Brittany were waiting on our front porch, but this time I wasn't afraid because Paul's letter was in my pocket, and I could feel the power of his love within me. "Emily," Karen's voice was sweet and sickly as we approached her. "We have to talk about Paul's estate." I stood proudly and looked her in the eye. "No, we don't, Karen. Paul left me everything. Everything is formal and lawful. Do you wonder why? Because we were his biological family. Please stop trespassing on my property. I don't need you here." For once, Karen was unable to speak. Brittany spoke quickly as she tugged at her arm. They got into their car and drove away. We had a busy few weeks after our visit with the lawyer, appreciating the distraction from my grief. I threw myself into addressing Paul's concerns. Thompson had said, the insurance reimbursement was enough to pay off our mortgage and leave us with plenty of money left over. I was looking through Paul's desk one afternoon. I discovered a little notebook. Wondering, His sloppy scribbling filled the pages. As I opened it, it served as a kind of notebook filled with his ideas and plans for the future, including the creation of a college fund for our future children. One entry was read, 1. To provide the best possible start in life. My heart tightened. We had discussed starting a family eventually, but we had decided to put it off until we were in a better financial position. Reading Paul's personal aspirations, now I experienced a new wave of sadness. Paul, oh Paul. I held the notebook close and murmured. That evening we had a lot planned. I couldn't sleep, so I tossed and turned. My thoughts kept straying to the journal about the unattainable future for us. When I finally drifted off to sleep, Paul appeared in my dream. He extended his hand to me with a reassuring grin, saying, "It's all right. Everything will be fine with Emily." His voice was calm, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me, even in the midst of everything. The next morning, as I was getting ready for work, I noticed a subtle shift within myself that I couldn't quite pinpoint. I barely made it to the bathroom before a sudden wave of nausea hit me. After a few days of this, I found myself standing in the drugstore, my hands shaking as I stared at the pregnancy tests. I quickly grabbed one and rushed home, my heart pounding. The 5 minutes I waited for the test results felt like an eternity. When I finally looked at the test, the 2 distinct blue lines stared back at me, overwhelming me with a swirl of emotions: joy, fear, grief, and hope. I collapsed to the floor of the bathroom, my tears falling freely. The morning sickness persisted over the next few days. At first, I thought it was just the stress and grief, but deep down, I knew it was something else. As I stood in the kitchen, wiping away my tears, my father's voice entered the room. I looked up to see him standing there, his expression changing from concern to alarm. "What's wrong, dear?" he asked. I held up the test, my hands shaking. "Dad, I'm pregnant," I said, my voice breaking as I collapsed into his arms. He held me tightly, stroking my hair gently. "It's all right," he whispered. "Everything will work out. You're not alone. This baby, and Emily, this child is a gift, a lasting piece of Paul." His words sank deep into my heart, bringing me comfort and a renewed sense of strength. This child, this little one growing inside me, was a part of Paul, a continuation of the love we had shared. Suddenly, the panic that had consumed me began to fade, replaced by a deep, unwavering resolve. "You're right," I said, wiping my eyes. "We'll be all right, and this baby is a blessing." Dad smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Now that's my girl. Since you're eating for 2, let's get you something to eat." As we made our way to the kitchen, I felt a sense of hope beginning to rise within me. With Paul's child growing inside me and my father by my side, I knew we could face anything. The days that followed were filled with a quiet optimism. My father was my rock, and together we set a new routine, just the 2 of us, eagerly awaiting the arrival of our newest family member. One beautiful afternoon, as I tended to the garden Dad and I had planted, I heard a car pull up. I turned to see Karen and Brittany standing at the door. "We need to talk to you, Emily," Karen said, her voice lacking the usual sharpness. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "We've hit some hard times," Brittany added, her eyes darting nervously. "Until we get back on our feet, we were wondering if we could stay in your father's old apartment." My heart sank. What could they possibly want? After everything they had done, they still dared to ask for more. I walked to the front of the house, one hand resting on my large belly. I couldn't believe the audacity they had to even ask. I took a deep breath, then calmly but firmly responded, "I'm sorry, but that's not possible. I don't want to talk to you anymore." Karen's face twisted in disgust as her eyes narrowed, taking in my pregnant belly. "You're pregnant," she sneered. "You've already moved on, found another man? It's unbelievable how you could do this so soon after Paul's death." I bit back my anger, refusing to rise to her provocations. I didn't want to mention that this was Paul's child. I didn't want my child growing up around people like her or Brittany. Instead, I coolly replied, "Don't worry about my personal life." Karen seemed to hesitate, likely taken aback by my response. She grabbed Brittany's arm and turned to leave. I watched them drive away, feeling a wave of calm wash over me. I had stood my ground, protected my family, and maintained my dignity. I knew now more than ever that I was doing what was best for me and my child. What do you do when the people you once called family continue to try and tear you down, even after all that's happened? Emily's journey has been one of heartbreak, resilience, and empowerment. From the devastating loss of her husband Paul to the relentless interference of her mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Emily has faced more than her fair share of hardship. But through it all, she has found strength in the love of her father, the memory of Paul, and the hope that her child brings. After Paul's tragic passing, Emily was left to navigate not just the overwhelming grief, but the attacks from Karen and Brittany, who sought to exploit her vulnerability. Yet through every confrontation, Emily has grown stronger, never backing down. With the unexpected blessing of her pregnancy, Emily now has a renewed sense of purpose. She is determined to give her child the peaceful, loving life that she and Paul had always dreamed of. When Karen and Brittany showed up again, expecting to take advantage of Emily's kindness, she stood firm. She refused to let them dictate her life, setting clear boundaries and protecting her family. She learned that sometimes standing your ground is the only way to reclaim your peace. Emily's story is not just about survival, it's about thriving despite the odds. It's about protecting what matters most and realizing that you can create a future that's your own, no matter the challenges in your way. What do you think? How would you stand up to someone who has hurt you repeatedly? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories of strength, survival, and healing.
The phone rang just as I was about to lock up the clinic for the night. It was one of those moments that you just know is going to change everything. I hesitated, staring at the caller ID that read Mom. My stomach churned. We hadn't spoken in months, and even then, it was more of a terse exchange than a conversation. Harper, came her crisp voice, cutting through the silence of the clinic. Your father is in the hospital. It's serious. I felt my heart drop. My name is Harper Calloway, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been a complicated dance between duty and defiance, especially when it comes to my mother, Evelyn. Is he okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He's stable for now, but you should come. He needs you, she replied, her words laced with an unspoken expectation. There it was. Not a request, but a demand. Memories of past betrayals flooded back, like when I was 19 and pregnant, and Evelyn decided that my future was more important than my choice. Her version of love always came with strings attached, and I was tired of being her marionette. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the tide of emotions. I'll be there, I said, knowing I had to see my father, Thomas, the silent bystander in Evelyn's schemes. Hanging up, I leaned against the counter, the sterile smell of disinfectant doing little to calm my racing mind. My father, with his quiet presence, had always been my ally, even if he rarely stood up to Evelyn. The thought of him ill and vulnerable tugged at my heart more than I wanted to admit. As I drove home, the streetlights blurred into streaks of gold against the darkening sky. I thought about the last time I was at my parents' house, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Evelyn's obsession with appearances had always been at odds with my desire for authenticity. She wanted a perfect daughter to match her perfect life, but I had other plans. Marcus, my husband, was waiting for me when I got home. His warm smile and steady gaze were a balm to my frayed nerves. Hey, what's going on? He asked, noticing the worry etched on my face. I sighed, dropping my keys on the table. It's Dad. He's in the hospital. Mom wants me to come. He nodded, pulling me into a comforting embrace. Do you want me to come with you? I shook my head. No, I need to do this alone. But thank you. Marcus understood. He always did. He knew the tangled web of my family dynamics and the emotional toll it took on me. Call me if you need anything, okay? I nodded, grateful for his support. As I packed a bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that this visit would be different. There was a tension in the air, a sense of impending confrontation that both scared and invigorated me. The drive to my parents' house felt like a journey into the past. Every mile brought back memories of Evelyn's controlling nature and the pressure to conform to her high standards. But it also reminded me of my father, his quiet support, even when he didn't have the courage to stand up to her. Arriving at the hospital, I was greeted by the sterile scent of antiseptic and the low hum of machinery. My heart pounded as I made my way to my father's room, bracing myself for what I might find. Evelyn was there, her posture rigid, her expression carefully composed. "Harper," she said, her voice a mix of relief and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "How is he?" I asked, bypassing any pleasantries. "He's resting," she replied, her gaze flicking to the door behind her. "You should see him." I nodded, stepping past her into the dimly lit room. My father lay there, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. Seeing him like this, my heart ached with a mix of love and regret. As I sat by his bedside, I felt a surge of determination. This time, I wouldn't let Evelyn manipulate me. I would be here for my father, but on my terms. Whatever game she was playing, I was ready to face it. Just as I was about to leave the room, Evelyn spoke, her voice low and controlled. "Harper, we need to talk about the future. Your father's condition changes everything." Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a threat. I met her gaze, feeling the weight of her expectations clash with my resolve. This was just the beginning, and I knew that whatever happened next would set the course for everything that followed. Walking up the path to my childhood home, I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. The house stood pristine, the garden meticulously manicured. Marcus would appreciate the symmetry, I thought with a faint smile. But to me, it was a facade, a picture-perfect exterior that masked the emotional chaos inside. As I stepped inside, the air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers and polished wood. Everything was in its place, just as Evelyn liked it. "Harper," she called from the living room, her voice carrying that authoritative edge. I found her arranging a vase of roses, each bloom strategically placed. "You made it," she said, glancing up briefly before returning to her task. Her tone was casual, as if we were discussing the weather, not my father's health. "How's Dad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "He's resting," she replied, not looking up. "The doctors are hopeful, but he needs peace and stability." I nodded, though I knew what she really meant. Peace and stability were her code for control. I watched her for a moment, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact. It was as if she was playing a role, the concerned wife, the doting mother, all while orchestrating the scene. "Evelyn," I started, choosing my words carefully, "I want to be here for Dad, but I need to know what's really going on." She paused, finally meeting my gaze. "Everything is under control," she said, her voice smooth. "We just need to keep up appearances, for his sake." For his sake. The words echoed in my mind, a familiar refrain. I felt a flicker of anger, but I swallowed it down. "I'm not here for appearances," I said quietly. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a crack in her polished veneer. "Harper, we all have roles to play. You know how important this is for our family." I bit back a retort, knowing it would only escalate things. Instead, I nodded, though my resolve hardened. This time, I would not be swept into her games. The rest of the day passed in a blur of polite conversations and stilted silences. I checked on my father, who was asleep, his breathing steady but shallow. Seeing him like this, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. I had to be here, but on my terms. Later, as I sat on the porch, Evelyn joined me, a glass of iced tea in her hand. "It's been a while since you were last here," she said, her tone almost conversational. "Yeah," I replied, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Life gets busy." She nodded, sipping her drink. "I heard you and Marcus are doing well." "We are," I said, feeling a warmth at the mention of his name. "He's been really supportive." "Good," she said, though there was a hint of something else in her voice, envy, perhaps, or regret. "It's important to have someone reliable." I turned to look at her, searching for any sign of sincerity. "Why did you really call me here, Evelyn?" She hesitated, a rare moment of vulnerability flickering across her face. "Harper, I need you to help manage things. The school board is watching, and with your father's condition." There it was. The truth, or at least part of it. Her need to maintain her image, to keep everything looking perfect from the outside. "I'm here for Dad," I said firmly. "But I won't be part of any charade." She stiffened, her composure slipping for just a second. "This is about family," she insisted. "Family," I repeated, the word heavy with irony. "I'm here for Dad, and I'll help where I can. But I won't pretend everything's fine when it's not." Evelyn said nothing, her silence more telling than any argument. As the evening wore on, I felt a shift, a subtle change in our dynamic. I wasn't the compliant daughter anymore, and she knew it. That night, as I lay in my old room, surrounded by remnants of a past life, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Evelyn might want to use Dad's illness as a pawn, but I wouldn't let her. I had my own path to forge, my own story to tell. Before drifting off to sleep, I thought about Marcus, about the life we were building together. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time, I felt ready to face them, on my terms, not Evelyn's. And that was a victory in itself. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. I stood by the window, sipping my coffee, trying to brace myself for whatever the day might bring. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken words and unresolved tensions. I was pulled from my thoughts by a knock on the door. Evelyn entered without waiting for an invitation, her expression a mix of determination and something else, perhaps desperation. "Harper, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight. I turned to face her, setting my coffee down. "About what?" She hesitated, a rare flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "The school board is having a meeting next week. They want to discuss Thomas's condition and how it might affect my position." There it was, the real reason for her urgency. Her image, her status, always at the forefront. "And you need me there because it would look better if the family presented a united front," she replied, her words carefully measured. I felt a surge of frustration. "You mean if I play along with your version of reality?" "Harper," she said, her tone softening, "this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. The stability of our family." I shook my head, disbelief mingling with anger. Stability? Or control? Her eyes flashed, but she quickly composed herself. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." "Maybe not," I conceded, "but I do understand the pressure you've put on me." "On Dad." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "And what about Logan? Does he know about all this?" Her expression tightened at the mention of my ex-boyfriend. "Logan has nothing to do with this, doesn't he?" I challenged. "He was part of your plans before, wasn't he?" Evelyn's silence was answer enough. I felt a bitter satisfaction at having hit a nerve. But before I could press further, my father's voice called out from down the hall. I excused myself, leaving Evelyn standing there, her composure cracking. In my father's room, I found him sitting up, looking more alert than he had the day before. "Harper," he greeted, his voice warm but weary. "Hey, Dad," I said, sitting beside him. "How are you feeling?" "Better," he replied, though his eyes betrayed his fatigue. "It's good to see you." We sat in silence for a moment, the unspoken words hanging between us. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I'm sorry, Harper. For everything." I looked at him surprised. "Dad, you don't have to." "No," he interrupted gently, "I do. I should have spoken up more. I should have been there for you." His admission was like a balm, soothing some of the old wounds. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. As I sat with him, I noticed a stack of papers on the bedside table. Among them was a letter, the handwriting unmistakably his. Curious, I picked it up, glancing at him for permission. He nodded, a resigned look in his eyes. "I wrote that a while back. Never had the courage to give it to you." I unfolded the letter, my heart pounding as I read his words of regret and love. He acknowledged his silence, his complicity in Evelyn's schemes, and his desire for me to find my own path. It was a revelation, one that deepened my understanding of him and his struggles. "Thank you," I said again, my voice barely a whisper. "This means a lot." He nodded, a small, sad smile on his lips. "I just want you to be happy, Harper. To live your life." As I left the room, the letter clutched tightly in my hand, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My father's words were a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight, that there was more to our family than Evelyn's manipulations. I found Evelyn in the kitchen, her back to me as she prepared breakfast. "I'm going to the board meeting," I announced, my voice steady. She turned, surprise flickering across her face. You will. But not for the reasons you think, I added. I'm going to support Dad to make sure his wishes are heard. Evelyn's expression hardened, but she nodded. As long as we're on the same page. We're not, I replied, meeting her gaze. And we never will be. With that, I left the room, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with my father's support and my own determination to break free from the past. As I stepped outside, the morning air felt crisp and full of promise. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I felt like I was truly on my own path, and that was a victory worth fighting for. Back at the clinic, the familiar sounds of barking dogs and the hum of activity grounded me, offering a brief respite from the chaos at home. But my mind was still tangled in the web of family drama, and I knew I needed to talk to Marcus. After work, I found him in our small garden, tending to the plants with his usual care. The sight of him, so focused and calm, brought a sense of peace. Hey, I called, walking over to join him. He looked up, wiping his hands on a cloth. Hey, how was your day? Eventful, I replied, leaning against the fence. I need to talk to you about something. He nodded, setting aside his tools. What's up? I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out. I found a letter from my dad. He wrote it a while ago, apologizing for not standing up to Evelyn. It was a lot to take in. Marcus listened, his expression thoughtful. How do you feel about it? Conflicted, I admitted. It's like, on one hand, I'm grateful he acknowledged it. But on the other, it's hard not to feel angry about all the years he stayed silent. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. It sounds like he's trying to make amends in his own way. Yeah, I said, nodding. And I want to be there for him. But Evelyn's still trying to control everything. Marcus frowned, a hint of frustration in his eyes. She's using his illness to keep up appearances, isn't she? Exactly, I replied, the words bitter on my tongue. And now she wants me to help her put on a show for the school board. He sighed, shaking his head. You're not obligated to play her games, Harper. I know, I said, feeling a surge of determination. But I can't just walk away. I need to stand up for Dad and for myself. Marcus nodded, his support unwavering. Whatever you decide, I'm here. His reassurance was a balm, giving me the strength I needed. But as I sat there, a new thought struck me, a possibility I hadn't considered. Marcus, I said slowly, what if we start looking into adoption? His eyes widened slightly, surprise mingling with curiosity. Are you sure? I've been thinking about it, I admitted. I want a family, but I want it to be on our terms, not dictated by my parents' expectations. He smiled, a warmth spreading across his face. I'm all in, if that's what you want. His response filled me with hope, a vision of a future free from the shadows of the past. But before I could bask in that feeling, my phone buzzed, pulling me back to reality. It was a message from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened it. The words were like a punch to the gut. Meet me. We need to talk. It's about Evelyn. I showed the message to Marcus, my mind racing. Who do you think it is? He asked, a hint of concern in his voice. I have no idea, I replied, my heart pounding. But I need to find out. The next day, I arrived at the designated meeting spot, a quiet cafe on the edge of town. My mind was a whirlwind of possibilities, none of them comforting. As I scanned the room, I spotted a familiar face, Logan. He waved me over, a look of urgency in his eyes. Harper, he said as I approached, thanks for coming. I sat down wary. What's this about, Logan? He leaned in, his expression serious. It's about Evelyn. She's planning something, and I thought you should know. I frowned, skepticism creeping in. Why tell me now? Because, he said, his voice low, she's using me to keep tabs on you. She's worried you'll disrupt her plans. His admission was like a cold bucket of water, shocking and unwelcome. And you're just going along with it? I was, he admitted, guilt flashing across his face. But I realized it's not right. You deserve to know. I studied him, searching for any hint of deception. Why should I trust you? Because, he said, meeting my gaze, I owe you that much. His words hung in the air, a fragile bridge between past betrayals and possible redemption. I didn't know if I could trust him, but his warning couldn't be ignored. As I left the cafe, my mind was a storm of emotions. Logan's revelation had shifted the ground beneath me, forcing me to reevaluate my next steps. I knew one thing for certain. The stakes were higher than ever, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. The sun was setting as I returned home, the weight of Logan's warning still heavy on my mind. I found Marcus in the living room, his laptop open as he worked on a design. He looked up, concern etched on his face. "How did it go?" I dropped my bag on the floor, running a hand through my hair. "Logan told me Evelyn's been using him to keep tabs on me. She's planning something, but he didn't know what." Marcus frowned, closing his laptop. "Do you think he's telling the truth?" "I don't know," I admitted, pacing the room. "But I can't ignore it. If Evelyn's up to something, I need to be ready." He stood, crossing the room to pull me into a hug. "We'll figure it out, Harper. You're not alone in this." His words were reassuring, but they didn't ease the knot of anxiety in my chest. As much as I wanted to believe Logan, his past betrayals made it hard to trust his motives. Yet the urgency in his voice had been genuine, and that was enough to keep me on edge. The next day, I decided to confront Evelyn. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait for the other shoe to drop. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found her in the garden, pruning the roses with precise, deliberate movements. "Evelyn," I called, my voice cutting through the quiet afternoon. She glanced up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Harper, I wasn't expecting you." "I need to talk to you," I said, stepping closer. "About Logan." Her expression barely flickered. "What about him?" "He told me you've been using him to keep tabs on me," I said, watching her closely. "Is it true?" She set down the shears, her gaze steady. "Logan is not a reliable source, Harper. You know that." "Maybe," I replied, crossing my arms. "But I also know you'll do whatever it takes to maintain control." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't deny it. "I'm doing what's necessary for our family." "For your image, you mean?" I countered, frustration simmering beneath my words. "What are you planning, Evelyn?" She sighed, a calculated move. "The board meeting is coming up, and I need to ensure everything goes smoothly. That's all." I shook my head, disbelief mingling with anger. "You're using Dad's illness as leverage, aren't you?" Her silence was answer enough. I felt a surge of determination, a resolve to protect my father from becoming a pawn in her games. "I won't let you manipulate him or me." "Harper," she said, her voice taking on a pleading tone, "I just want what's best for all of us." "Then stop trying to control everything," I shot back. "Let us make our own choices." She opened her mouth to respond, but I turned and walked away, my heart pounding. I needed to get out of there before I said something I'd regret. Back at home, I found Marcus waiting for me, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "How did it go?" I sank onto the couch, exhaustion washing over me. She didn't deny it. "She's using Dad's illness to keep up appearances." He sat beside me, taking my hand. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, frustration lacing my voice. "I feel like I'm caught in a web, and every move I make just tightens it." He squeezed my hand, his presence a steady anchor. "We'll find a way through this, Harper. Together." His words were a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't fighting this battle alone. But as the evening wore on, a new thought crept into my mind, a possibility I hadn't dared to consider. "What if we go public?" I asked, the idea forming as I spoke. "Expose Evelyn's manipulation to the board, to the community?" Marcus looked thoughtful, weighing the implications. "It's a big risk, but it could force her hand." "I know," I said, the prospect both terrifying and exhilarating. "But it might be the only way to stop her." He nodded, his expression resolute. "If that's what you want to do, I'm with you." His support was a balm, giving me the courage to consider the unthinkable. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and the fallout could be severe, but it was time to take a stand. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of the decision settled over me. I was on the brink of a major crisis, one that could redefine everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and justice. But for the first time, I felt ready to face it head-on, determined to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. The community event was in full swing when Marcus and I arrived, the air buzzing with chatter and laughter. It was the kind of gathering Evelyn thrived in, where appearances mattered more than reality. As we entered, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach, knowing what lay ahead. Evelyn spotted us almost immediately, her smile as polished as ever. "Harper, Marcus," she greeted, her voice smooth. "I'm glad you could make it." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, though the words felt hollow. As the evening wore on, I watched Evelyn work the room, her charm on full display. But beneath the surface, I could sense the tension, the pressure she was under to maintain her facade. It was only a matter of time before the cracks began to show. The opportunity came when Evelyn, in her role as the evening's host, took the stage to make a speech. As she spoke about family values and community, I felt a surge of anger at the hypocrisy of it all. My hands clenched into fists as I listened, the urge to expose the truth almost overwhelming. But it wasn't until she turned her attention to me that the real confrontation began. "And let's not forget the importance of legacy," she said, her gaze landing on me. "Harper, dear, when will we be hearing the pitter-patter of little feet?" The question hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in a seemingly innocent inquiry. I felt Marcus tense beside me, his support a steady presence. But this was a battle I had to fight on my own. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, the room falling silent as all eyes turned to me. "Actually, Evelyn," I said, my voice clear and steady, "there's something I've been meaning to share." The tension was palpable, a collective breath held in anticipation. Evelyn's smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "I can't have children," I said, the words ringing out like a bell. "And it's because years ago, you coerced me into an abortion." The silence that followed was deafening, the shock rippling through the crowd like a wave. Evelyn's composure shattered, her expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "Harper," she began, her voice shaking, "this is not the place." "Why not?" I interrupted, my resolve unyielding. "You wanted to make this about family, about legacy. Well, this is part of that story." The room was a sea of stunned faces, whispers breaking out like wildfire. I could see the carefully constructed image Evelyn had crafted beginning to crumble, the truth laying bare the manipulation and control. As the weight of my revelation settled over the room, I felt a strange sense of liberation. But it was short-lived, as the enormity of what I'd done began to sink in. The fallout would be severe, and I had no idea how it would affect my father or even Marcus. Evelyn's eyes were blazing, her voice low and dangerous. "You've gone too far, Harper." "Maybe," I conceded, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "But at least I'm not hiding anymore." The rest of the evening passed in a blur, the atmosphere tense and uncomfortable. Marcus stayed by my side, his presence a comforting anchor as we navigated the aftermath. But as we left the event, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me like a shadow. Back home, I collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion washing over me. Marcus sat beside me, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "You did it," he said softly. "Yeah," I replied, my voice hollow. "But at what cost?" He took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You stood up for yourself, Harper. That's worth something." I nodded, though the uncertainty lingered. I had exposed the truth, but the consequences were still unknown, and the path ahead felt more daunting than ever. As I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me, my mind a whirlwind of doubts and fears. I had reached a breaking point, the weight of my choices pressing down on me like a heavy shroud. But despite the darkness, a flicker of hope remained, a belief that, somehow, I would find a way through the storm. The morning after the community event felt like the calm before a storm. I woke up with a sense of dread, knowing that the fallout from my revelation was far from over. The house was quiet, Marcus already at work, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the decision I knew I had to make. I needed to see my father. I needed to know if he was okay after everything that had happened. The drive to my parents' house felt interminable, each mile filled with anticipation and fear. When I arrived, the house was eerily still, as if holding its breath. I found my father in his study, a place that had always been his sanctuary. He looked up as I entered, a mix of surprise and relief on his face. Harper, he greeted, his voice warm despite the tension in the air. Dad, I said, crossing the room to sit beside him. I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean to cause so much trouble. He shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. You spoke your truth, Harper. I'm proud of you for that. His words were a balm, soothing the guilt that had been gnawing at me. But before I could respond, Evelyn appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Harper, she said, her voice clipped. We need to talk. I nodded, feeling the weight of the confrontation looming. We moved to the living room, the air thick with unspoken words. Evelyn stood by the window, her posture rigid, as if bracing herself for what was to come. You've made quite a mess, she began, her tone sharp but controlled. I told the truth, I replied, meeting her gaze. Something you've been avoiding for years. She turned to face me, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and something else, fear, perhaps. You've jeopardized everything I've worked for. Your image. I challenged, my voice steady. Your perfect facade? Evelyn's composure slipped, her hands clenching into fists. This isn't just about me, Harper. It's about our family. Our family, I echoed, the words heavy with irony. The one you've controlled and manipulated for years? She flinched, the truth cutting deeper than any accusation. I did what I thought was best. For you, I said, my voice rising. Not for Dad, not for me. The room was charged with tension, the air crackling with the weight of our confrontation. But before I could continue, my father entered, his presence a calming force. Evelyn, he said quietly, his voice firm. It's time to stop. She turned to him, surprise flickering across her face. Thomas, you don't understand. No, he interrupted, his gaze steady. I do. And I should have said something a long time ago. The silence that followed was profound, a moment of reckoning that had been years in the making. Evelyn's eyes widened, her control slipping as the reality of the situation sank in. You're taking her side? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. I'm taking our side, he replied, his words gentle but resolute. This isn't about sides, Evelyn. It's about facing the truth. The room was still, the weight of his words settling over us like a heavy blanket. I watched as Evelyn's facade crumbled, the vulnerability beneath her polished exterior laid bare. For a moment, I saw her as she truly was, afraid, insecure, desperate to hold on to the image she'd created. And in that moment, I realized that revenge wasn't what I wanted. Justice wasn't about tearing her down. It was about breaking free from the chains of the past. Evelyn, I said softly, my voice carrying the weight of years of conflict and pain. I'm not here to destroy you. I just want to live my life on my terms. She said nothing, her silence a testament to the battle raging within her. But as I turned to leave, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a certainty that I was finally on the path to healing. Outside, the sun was shining, the world bright and full of promise. As I walked away from the house, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, I felt free. Free to define my own life, free to embrace the future with open arms. And that, I realized, was the true victory. The adoption process had been a whirlwind, each step bringing Marcus and me closer to the family we had longed for. The day we brought our daughter home was filled with a quiet joy that settled into every corner of our lives, a testament to the journey we had traveled to get here. As I sat in the nursery, watching her sleep, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was the life I had fought for, a life defined by love, not appearances. The shadows of the past seemed to fade, replaced by the promise of a future filled with hope and possibility. Marcus appeared in the doorway, a soft smile on his face. She's beautiful, isn't she? He said, joining me by the crib. She is, I replied, my heart swelling with gratitude. I can't believe she's finally here. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, his presence a comforting anchor. We did it, Harper. We made it. I nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle over me. We had faced the storm and come out stronger on the other side. But as much as I wanted to leave the past behind, there was still one piece of unfinished business that lingered in my mind. A few days later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unmistakably Evelyn's, the envelope sealed with a formality that belied the emotions within. I hesitated, the weight of our history pressing down on me as I opened it. The letter was brief, but the words carried a depth of emotion I hadn't expected. Evelyn expressed a desire to reconcile, acknowledging her past mistakes and expressing a hope for healing. It was an olive branch, tentative and fragile, but genuine. I showed the letter to Marcus, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. "What do you think?" I asked, needing his perspective. He took a moment to read it, his expression thoughtful. "It sounds like she's trying in her own way." "Yeah," I said, feeling a mix of hope and skepticism. "But can I trust her?" He shrugged, his gaze steady. "That's up to you, Harper. But maybe it's worth considering." His words echoed in my mind as I pondered my next move. Forgiveness was a complex thing, tangled up in years of hurt and betrayal. But as I looked at our daughter, I realized that I wanted to create a world for her that was free from the shadows of the past. With a deep breath, I picked up the phone and dialed Evelyn's number. The line rang, each tone a reminder of the distance that had grown between us. When she answered, her voice was hesitant, unsure. "Harper," she said, a note of surprise in her tone. "Evelyn," I replied, my voice steady. "I got your letter." There was a pause, the silence filled with unspoken words. "I meant what I wrote," she said finally, her voice soft. "I'd like to try and make things right." I considered her words, the sincerity behind them. "I'd like that too," I admitted, feeling the tension begin to ease. "But it's going to take time." "I understand," she replied, a hint of relief in her voice. "Thank you, Harper." As we ended the call, I felt a sense of closure, a resolution that had been a long time coming. It wasn't perfect, and there was still much to be mended. But it was a start. In the days that followed, I focused on the life Marcus and I were building, the family we were creating. It wasn't always easy, but it was ours, and that was enough. One evening, as I watched the sunset from our porch, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The struggles, the triumphs, the lessons learned along the way. I realized that the themes of revenge and justice had transformed into something deeper, a quest for truth, for authenticity, for love. As the sky turned to twilight, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of promise. And whatever came next, I knew I was ready to face it, surrounded by the love of the family I had chosen and the life I had fought to create. I never expected to find my life unraveling over a forgotten jacket. There I was, standing in the bedroom, about to head out for one of the most important presentations of my career. I was an urban planner, and today was the day I was pitching my proposal for a new eco-friendly district in the city. But instead of focusing on my notes, I found myself holding Jamie's jacket, the one he'd tossed carelessly on the bed the night before. "I'm Harper, by the way. 32, married to Jamie for 5 years, and until that moment, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. But as I reached into the jacket pocket, my fingers brushed against something unexpected. A phone. Not his usual one, mind you. This was a cheap burner phone. My heart skipped a beat as I unlocked it with a simple swipe. There were messages, all from one contact, labeled only with a heart emoji. The first message was innocuous enough. Just a simple goodnight, love. But as I scrolled further, the words became more intimate, more damning. My stomach twisted as I read the last message, sent just last night. "I can't wait to see you again, Celeste." Celeste. My sister. The name hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and swaying on my feet. I could barely process the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it. Jamie, my husband, and Celeste, the sister who'd always craved the spotlight, now secretly entwined in a way I couldn't even begin to fathom. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone clutched tightly in my hand. I should have been angry, furious even, but all I felt was a cold numbness spreading through my chest. I knew I had to confront him, but not now, not with the presentation looming. I needed to focus, needed to put this aside, at least temporarily. Jamie walked in, his usual charming smile plastered across his face. "Hey, you ready for today?" I forced a smile, tucking the phone back into his jacket pocket. "Yeah, just about. You?" "Of course. I'll be cheering you on from the sidelines," he said, leaning in for a quick peck on the cheek. I turned slightly, letting him kiss the air instead. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he chose not to. As I left the house, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How long had this been going on? Why Celeste, of all people? The questions buzzed around my head like angry bees, and I had no answers. The presentation went by in a blur. I delivered my pitch, answered questions, and shook hands, all while feeling like I was watching someone else do it. My body moved on autopilot, my mind trapped in a loop of disbelief and betrayal. Later, back home, I waited for Jamie to return. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I would say, how I would confront him. But when he finally walked through the door, all my carefully planned words scattered like leaves in the wind. "Harper, you okay? You seem off," he said, concern lacing his voice. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I found something today. In your jacket." His face paled slightly, a flicker of panic crossing his features. "What do you mean?" I held up the burner phone, watching as his eyes widened. "This." "Care to explain?" Jamie opened his mouth, but no words came out. It was all the confirmation I needed. The silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. "I don't know what to say," he finally murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Try telling the truth," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked at me, a mixture of guilt and something else, maybe regret, shadowing his eyes. "It just happened, Harper. I didn't mean for it to." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "It just happened. With my sister." The room fell silent again, the weight of his betrayal hanging between us like a storm cloud. I turned away, unable to look at him any longer. This was only the beginning, I realized. The beginning of something I hadn't planned for, hadn't wanted. But it was here, and I had to face it. As I stood there, my mind racing, I knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. The next morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The events of the previous day felt like a bad dream, one I couldn't quite shake off. Jamie had left early for work, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing sense of betrayal that gnawed at my insides. I decided it was time to face the music and call a family meeting. If there was one thing I'd learned from years of navigating the complexities of urban planning, it was that problems rarely solve themselves. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I called Theo first, knowing he'd be the easiest to convince. "Hey, can you come over later? We need to talk about something important." Theo didn't hesitate. "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'll explain when you get here." Lucas took a little more persuasion. "I've got a shift at the clinic," he said, sounding distracted. "Please, Lucas. It's important." There was a pause, then a resigned sigh. "All right. I'll be there." Finally, I called my parents. Evelyn answered, her voice warm and welcoming. "Harper, darling. How's my favorite daughter?" I winced at the unintended sting of her words. "Can you and Dad come by this afternoon? I need to talk to everyone." "Of course, dear. Is this about that big project of yours?" "No," I replied, my voice tight. "It's personal." The hours dragged on until they arrived. Evelyn and Walter settled on the couch, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Theo and Lucas sat across from them, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. I stood in front of them, feeling like I was about to present a case in court. "Thanks for coming," I began, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. "There's something I need to tell you all." Evelyn leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What is it, Harper?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "Jamie is having an affair. With Celeste." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Walter shifted uncomfortably, while Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Theo was the first to speak. "Are you sure, Harper?" I nodded, feeling the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill. "I found a phone messages between them. It's true." Lucas looked at me, his eyes filled with empathy. "I'm so sorry, Harper. I can't believe she would do this to you." Evelyn shook her head, disbelief etched on her face. "There must be some misunderstanding." "Celeste wouldn't." "There's no misunderstanding." I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. "She did this. And Jamie, he didn't deny it." Walter sighed, rubbing his temples. "This is complicated. Complicated." I echoed, incredulous. It's betrayal, plain and simple. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes pleading. Harper, you know how Celeste can be. Maybe she didn't mean to. Didn't mean to? I interrupted, my frustration boiling over. This isn't an accident, Mom. She's been seeing my husband behind my back. The room fell silent again, the tension thick and palpable. I could see the gears turning in their minds, trying to process the mess we found ourselves in. Theo cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. What do you want to do, Harper? I don't know yet, I admitted, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. But I can't just ignore this. As the conversation continued, I noticed Evelyn and Walter exchanging glances. Their expressions a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. It was then that I realized the depth of the fracture in our family, the unspoken favoritism that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. Before we could delve deeper, the door swung open, and Celeste walked in, her usual confident stride faltering as she took in the scene. What's going on? I turned to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. We know, Celeste. About you and Jamie. She blinked, momentarily speechless, before her face hardened into a mask of defiance. So what if you do? The audacity of her response took my breath away. I watched as her eyes flicked to our parents, seeking some form of support or validation. Evelyn looked away, while Walter's expression remained unreadable. You can't just waltz in here and act like nothing happened, Theo said, his voice firm. Celeste crossed her arms, her posture defensive. I didn't plan this, Harper. It just happened. I shook my head, the anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. You've always wanted what I have, Celeste. But this is too much. The room fell into silence once more, the weight of the situation settling heavily over us all. As I stood there, facing my sister, I realized that this was only the beginning of a long and painful journey, but I was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. The tension in the room was palpable, hanging heavy like a thick fog that refused to lift. I stood there, facing Celeste, my pulse a steady drumbeat in my ears. Her defiance was a slap in the face, but what came next shattered whatever fragile hope I had left for our relationship. I'm pregnant, Celeste announced, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. The words hit me like a freight train, leaving me breathless and reeling. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands trembling despite my efforts to keep them steady. I glanced around the room, taking in the shock mirrored in my brother's eyes, the disbelief etched on our parents' faces. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Celeste, are you sure? Celeste nodded, her expression unreadable. I'm sure. Walter shifted in his seat, his voice a low rumble. And Jamie is the father? Celeste hesitated, then nodded again. Yes. I struggled to process the revelation, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts and none at all. This was beyond betrayal. It was a complete upheaval of everything I thought I knew. I felt the room closing in around me, the walls pressing in as I fought to breathe. Theo broke the silence, his voice steady but tinged with anger. How could you do this, Celeste? To Harper, of all people. Celeste's eyes flashed, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her bravado. I didn't plan this, Theo. It just happened. Lucas shook his head, disappointment heavy in his voice. That's not an excuse, Celeste. You've hurt Harper more than you can imagine. I stood there, absorbing their words, my heart aching with a pain I couldn't describe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out at the unfairness of it all. But instead, I just stood there, numb and silent. Evelyn turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and something else, perhaps a plea for understanding. Harper, I know this is hard, but maybe we can find a way to work through this as a family. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the room. A family? I repeated, incredulous. This isn't a family, Mom. It's a mess. Walter cleared his throat, his expression stern. We need to think about what's best for everyone involved. I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. Everyone involved? What about me? What about what's best for me? The room fell silent again, the weight of the situation pressing down on all of us. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to keep my head above water in a sea of betrayal and broken promises. I need some air, I muttered, turning on my heel and heading for the door. I didn't wait for a response. Didn't care to hear whatever platitudes they might offer. I just needed to get out, to escape the suffocating confines of the room and the reality I found myself trapped in. Outside, the cool air hit my face, a welcome reprieve from the chaos inside. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging within me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the sense of loss that threatened to overwhelm me. As I stood there, staring out into the distance, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my heart sinking as I saw Jamie's name flash across the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, before finally answering. "Harper," he began, his voice filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "What do you want, Jamie?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of warmth. "I heard from Celeste," he said, his words careful and measured. "I'm sorry. Sorry." I repeated, my anger flaring. "You think sorry is enough?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "I know it's not, but I want to make things right." I laughed again, the sound harsh and unforgiving. "Make things right? You've got a funny way of showing it." "Please, Harper," he pleaded. "Can we just talk?" I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "I don't know, Jamie. I don't know if I can ever forgive you." The line went silent, the weight of my words hanging between us. I ended the call, slipping the phone back into my pocket as I turned away from the house, the life I'd once known slipping further from my grasp. As I walked away, I realized that this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey toward healing and understanding, toward finding my own path amid the wreckage of what had been. And though I didn't know where it would lead, I was determined to find out. The decision to leave Jamie was both the hardest and easiest choice I'd ever made. Hard because of the love that once existed, easy because of the betrayal that had shattered it. That evening, I packed a suitcase with essentials, leaving behind the life we'd built together. As I zipped the bag, I felt a strange mix of freedom and fear. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on my shoulders, but it was a burden I was willing to bear. I found refuge at Theo's place, his apartment a sanctuary from the chaos that had become my life. He welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked, offering the kind of unconditional support I desperately needed. "Stay as long as you need," Theo said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Thanks, Theo. I don't know what I'd do without you," I replied, trying to muster a smile. We sat in silence for a while, the television murmuring softly in the background. I could feel his eyes on me, a silent offer of support, but I wasn't ready to talk about it. Not yet. The next day, I threw myself into work, seeking solace in the familiar rhythm of urban planning. My team was preparing for a major presentation, and the pressure was a welcome distraction from my personal turmoil. As I buried myself in blueprints and zoning laws, I felt a sense of control returning, a lifeline amid the storm. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It was late afternoon when Mason Reed, a colleague and friend, found me hunched over my desk, surrounded by papers and half-empty coffee cups. "Hey, Harper," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You've been at it for hours. Want to grab a bite?" I hesitated, the idea of stepping away from work daunting, but Mason's easy smile and genuine concern were hard to resist. "Yeah, sure. I could use a break." We ended up at a small cafe around the corner, the kind with mismatched chairs and a menu scribbled on a chalkboard. We talked about work, the upcoming project, anything but the elephant in the room. But Mason, perceptive as ever, didn't let it slide for long. "You seem different, Harper." "Everything all right?" he asked, his tone gentle but probing. I sighed, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "It's been a rough few days." Mason nodded, waiting for me to continue. His patience was a balm, giving me space to find the words. "Jamie and Celeste," I finally said, the names tasting bitter on my tongue. "It's a mess." He didn't push for details, just nodded in understanding. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." "Thanks, Mason." "I appreciate it," I replied, grateful for his presence. As we left the cafe, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days, hope. Maybe it was the warmth of a friend's support, or the realization that I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Whatever it was It gave me the strength to face what came next. Back at Theo's, I found a message waiting for me. It was from Evelyn, asking me to meet her and Walter at their house. The request was unusual, given our recent conversations, and it set my nerves on edge. But curiosity, and perhaps a lingering sense of duty, compelled me to go. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Evelyn and Walter sat across from me, their expressions a mix of concern and something else I couldn't quite place. "We've been thinking about everything," Evelyn began, her voice careful. "And we want to help." I raised an eyebrow, skepticism coloring my response. "Help? How?" Walter cleared his throat, a sign he was about to say something significant. "We've decided to support Celeste and Jamie financially." The words hung in the air, each syllable a blow to my fragile resolve. I stared at them, disbelief and betrayal warring within me. "You're what?" Evelyn reached for my hand, her touch both familiar and foreign. "We know this is hard, Harper, but they need us." I pulled my hand away, anger flaring. "And what about me? Do I not need support?" Walter sighed, his expression weary. "You're strong, Harper. You've always been strong." The implication was clear, and it stung more than I cared to admit. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't believe this. You're choosing them over me." "It's not about choosing," Evelyn insisted, her voice pleading. But it was. It always had been. I turned away, my heart heavy with the weight of their decision. As I walked out, I realized that my understanding of family, loyalty, and justice was shifting. The lines were blurring, and I was left to navigate the murky waters on my own terms. The days following my parents' decision to support Celeste and Jamie were a blur of anger and disbelief. I poured myself into work, seeking refuge in the meticulous details of urban planning. It was the only thing that made sense, the only place where I felt in control. One afternoon, as I was sketching out a new layout for a community park, my phone buzzed with a message from Lucas. "Hey, can we meet?" "I think we need to talk." I agreed, and we met at a small park near his clinic. The air was crisp, the sun casting long shadows as it dipped toward the horizon. Lucas was already there, sitting on a bench, his face thoughtful as he watched a group of children play nearby. "Thanks for coming," he said as I approached. "Of course. What's up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about everything, and I think you should know something." The seriousness in his voice set me on edge. "What is it, Lucas?" He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Celeste isn't just pregnant. She's been struggling financially for a while now. Jamie's been helping her out, which is why they got close." I blinked, processing the information. "So this wasn't just about an affair?" Lucas shook his head. "No, it seems like it started as them trying to figure things out. But then it escalated." The revelation added another layer to the tangled web of betrayal. It didn't excuse their actions, but it complicated my feelings. I felt a pang of guilt, wondering if I'd been too focused on my own hurt to see the bigger picture. Why didn't they just ask for help? I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. "Pride, maybe. Or shame." "I don't know, Harper," Lucas replied, his expression pained. "But I thought you should know." I nodded, gratitude and confusion swirling within me. "Thanks, Lucas. I appreciate you telling me." As we sat there in silence, I realized that my understanding of justice was shifting. It wasn't just about retribution for the wrongs done to me. It was about understanding the complexities of human motivations and the gray areas that often went unnoticed. Later that evening, I found myself at a crossroads. Mason had invited me to a gallery opening, a chance to step away from the chaos and enjoy something beautiful. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to let someone new into my life, even as a friend. But Mason's quiet persistence was hard to resist, and I agreed to go. The gallery was bustling with people, the walls adorned with vibrant paintings that seemed to pulse with life. Mason greeted me with a warm smile, his presence a calming balm against the backdrop of my turbulent thoughts. As we wandered through the exhibits, Mason's easy conversation and genuine interest in the art helped me relax. I found myself laughing at his dry humor, the tension in my shoulders easing for the first time in days. We stopped in front of a particularly striking piece, a swirling mass of colors that seemed to capture the chaos and beauty of life. Mason turned to me, his expression thoughtful. You know, art is a lot like life. It's messy, unpredictable, but sometimes you find something beautiful in the chaos. His words resonated with me, echoing the thoughts I'd been grappling with. I think you're right, I replied, my voice softer than I intended. As the evening wore on, I realized that I didn't have to face everything alone. Mason's presence, though new, was a reminder that there were people who cared, who were willing to stand by me as I navigated the murky waters of my life. But just as I began to feel a semblance of peace, my phone buzzed with a message from Theo. Emergency family meeting. You need to come. My heart sank, the fragile calm I'd found shattering as I excused myself and headed to Theo's apartment. The atmosphere was tense when I arrived, everyone gathered with expressions of concern and urgency. What's going on? I asked, my voice edged with worry. Theo exchanged a glance with Lucas before speaking. Mom and Dad have decided to mortgage their house to help Celeste and Jamie. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, the implications crashing over me like a tidal wave. They what? They think it's the only way to keep everyone afloat, Lucas added, his tone apologetic. I felt the room spin, the ground shifting beneath my feet. This was more than just a betrayal. It was a complete upheaval of everything I thought I knew about family and loyalty. As I stood there, grappling with the enormity of the situation, I realized that my journey was far from over. I would have to dig deeper, find strength I didn't know I had, and redefine what justice and family truly meant to me. The weight of my parents' decision to mortgage their home settled over me like a thick, suffocating fog. Each breath felt heavy, each thought tangled in a web of betrayal and disbelief. I sat alone in Theo's living room, the silence pressing in around me, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. Theo and Lucas had tried to offer comfort, their words of support like lifelines tossed into the stormy sea I found myself adrift in. But their reassurances, though well-intentioned, felt hollow against the enormity of what I faced. My family, the very foundation of my life, had chosen a path that left me isolated and questioning everything I thought I knew. The next day, as I walked into work, I felt a strange detachment from the world around me. My colleagues greeted me with their usual smiles, but I could barely muster a response. I was a ghost, moving through the motions of my life, haunted by the betrayal that had upended everything. Mason found me at my desk, his concern evident in the way he lingered in the doorway. "Harper, can we talk?" I nodded, though my heart wasn't in it. We walked to a nearby cafe, the familiar setting a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. "Is everything okay?" Mason asked, his voice gentle but probing. I hesitated, unsure of how to put my feelings into words. "It's just, everything's a mess, Mason." He nodded, his understanding palpable. "I'm here if you need anything. You don't have to go through this alone." His offer was genuine, and I felt a flicker of gratitude amid the despair. But even Mason's kindness couldn't erase the reality of my situation. My family was crumbling, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. As we left the cafe, my phone buzzed with a message from Jamie. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." I felt a surge of anger, the audacity of his request igniting the simmering resentment within me. But curiosity and perhaps a lingering sense of unfinished business compelled me to agree. We met at a park, the setting eerily reminiscent of happier times. Jamie stood by a bench, his expression a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. "Thanks for coming," he began, his voice tentative. "What do you want, Jamie?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know I've messed up, but I want to make things right." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the still air. "Make things right? You've done nothing but make things worse." He flinched, the truth of my words hitting home. "I know, but I'm trying to fix it." "Fix it?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've destroyed everything, Jamie. There's no fixing this." His shoulders sagged, defeat etched into his features. "I'm sorry, Harper. I really am." The sincerity in his voice was unexpected, but it did little to soothe the raw wound of betrayal. "Sorry doesn't change anything." We stood there in silence, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. I felt a pang of sadness for what we'd lost, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of our situation. As I turned to leave, Jamie's next words stopped me cold. Celeste is considering giving up the baby. I froze, the implications of his statement crashing over me like a tidal wave. What? She's overwhelmed, Harper. She doesn't know what to do, he explained, his voice filled with a mix of desperation and regret. The revelation added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled web. It was a twist I hadn't anticipated, one that made the situation feel even more hopeless. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the fragile foundation of my life crumbling further. Back at Theo's, I sat in the darkened living room, the enormity of everything pressing down on me. My family was fractured, my marriage in ruins, and now this new complication threatened to unravel what little resolve I had left. As I sat there, the themes of revenge and justice that had driven me began to blur, their edges softened by the harsh realities of life. I realized that I was at a crossroads, faced with a choice that would define not only my future but the future of those around me. In that moment of darkness, I understood that true strength lay not in seeking revenge, but in finding a way to move forward, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. It was a daunting task, but one I was determined to face head-on, no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension as I stood on the threshold of my parents' home, preparing for what I knew would be a pivotal confrontation. The weight of their choices, the betrayal, and the tangled web of emotions had led us to this moment. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead, and pushed open the door. Inside, the atmosphere was charged, a storm of unspoken words and unresolved conflicts. Celeste sat on the couch, her expression a mix of defiance and vulnerability. Jamie stood nearby, his posture tense, while Evelyn and Walter hovered uncertainly, caught between their daughters. "Thank you for coming, Harper," Evelyn began, her voice a strained attempt at warmth. I nodded curtly, my gaze fixed on Celeste. "We need to talk." Celeste met my eyes, her bravado faltering. "I know." Jamie shifted uncomfortably, his presence a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. "We all need to talk," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a seat, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "You're considering giving up the baby," I stated, my words more accusation than question. Celeste flinched, her facade cracking. "I don't know what else to do, Harper. Everything's falling apart." I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger and hurt that had defined the past weeks. "You made choices, Celeste. Choices that affected all of us." "I know," she admitted, her voice small. "But I didn't mean for it to get this far." Jamie stepped forward, his expression earnest. "We're trying to fix things, Harper. We really are." I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Fix things? You've done nothing but make them worse." Evelyn interjected, her tone pleading. "Harper, please. We need to find a way forward." I turned to her, the weight of their decision to mortgage the house pressing heavily on my mind. "And what about you? You're risking everything for them." Walter sighed, his voice weary. "We're trying to help, Harper. It's what families do." "Is it?" I challenged, my voice rising. "Because it feels like you're choosing them over me." The room fell silent, the truth of my words hanging in the air. I could see the conflict in their eyes, the struggle to reconcile their actions with the consequences. As the tension reached a breaking point, an unexpected voice cut through the silence. Mason had arrived, his presence a steadying force amid the chaos. "Maybe we're looking at this the wrong way," he suggested, his tone calm but firm. I turned to him, surprised by his intervention. "What do you mean?" Mason stepped forward, addressing the room. "This isn't just about who did what. It's about what happens next. You all have a chance to make things right, but it starts with honesty." His words resonated, a beacon of clarity in the storm. I realized that revenge and justice weren't the only paths forward. There was room for understanding, for finding a way to rebuild. Celeste looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and hope. "I'm sorry, Harper." "Truly." I nodded, the anger that had fueled me beginning to ebb. "I know." Jamie spoke up, his voice steady. "We want to do better. For the baby, for all of us." I took a deep breath, the enormity of their words settling over me. This was the moment, the chance to redefine what family meant, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. "I can't promise anything," I said, my voice firm but open. "But I'm willing to try." The relief in the room was palpable, a collective exhale that signaled the beginning of a new chapter. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was fraught with challenges, but it was a start. As we sat together, discussing the future and the steps we needed to take, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in weeks. The themes of revenge and justice had evolved, giving way to understanding and the possibility of redemption. Mason's presence was a steady reminder that I wasn't alone, that there were people willing to stand by me as I navigated the complexities of life. As the conversation continued, I realized that the journey was far from over, but I was ready to face it with courage and hope. The days following the confrontation at my parents' house felt like a slow exhale after holding my breath for too long. The air was clearer, the path ahead not entirely free of obstacles, but at least visible. I found myself back at work, the steady rhythm of urban planning offering a welcome sense of normalcy. My projects, once a refuge, were now a testament to my resilience and growth. Mason and I had found a comfortable rhythm, his presence a steadying force in my life. We spent evenings exploring the city, discovering hidden gems and quiet corners that allowed us to talk and connect. Our conversations were easy, filled with laughter and understanding, a balm for the wounds that still lingered. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Mason turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "You've come a long way, Harper." I nodded, the truth of his words settling over me. "It hasn't been easy, but I think I'm finally finding my way." He smiled, a warm, reassuring presence. "You're stronger than you know." His words were a reminder of the journey I'd undertaken, the challenges I'd faced and overcome. I realized that my understanding of family, loyalty, and justice had evolved, shaped by the trials and tribulations of the past months. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of gold and pink, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The chaos that had once defined my life was giving way to something new, something hopeful. A few days later, I received a letter from my parents. The envelope was simple, unassuming, but the contents held the weight of 1,000 conversations left unsaid. Inside, a handwritten note from Evelyn and Walter expressed their regret, their desire to rebuild our relationship on new terms. "We've made mistakes, Harper. We see that now. We want to make things right if you'll let us," the letter read. I sat with their words, the sincerity and vulnerability evident in each line. It was an olive branch, a chance to redefine what family meant, not just for me, but for all of us. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that trust would take time to rebuild, but the possibility of healing was a powerful motivator. As I pondered their offer, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take shape. The themes of revenge and justice that had once driven me were now tempered by understanding and compassion. I realized that true strength lay not in holding on to past grievances, but in finding a way to move forward, to build something new from the remnants of what had been. In the weeks that followed, I reached out to Celeste and Jamie, tentative steps toward reconciliation. Our conversations were cautious, filled with the weight of our shared history, but there was a willingness to listen, to understand. Celeste had started therapy, a step toward healing that spoke of her desire to change. One afternoon, as I sat with Theo and Lucas, the sun streaming through the windows, I felt a sense of gratitude for the support they'd offered throughout my journey. Their unwavering presence had been a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone. "You've been amazing, you know that?" I said, my voice filled with warmth. Theo shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. "We're family, Harper. That's what we do." Lucas nodded, his eyes reflecting the same sentiment. "We're proud of you. For everything." Their words were a balm, soothing the lingering ache of past wounds. I realized that family wasn't just about blood, but about the connections we choose, the people who stand by us when the world feels like it's falling apart. As the story of my life continued to unfold, I knew that the journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty, but I was ready to face them with courage and hope. The resolution wasn't perfect, nor was it complete. There were still questions, lingering uncertainties that would take time to unravel. But the foundation was there, a new beginning built on the lessons of the past, the promise of a future defined by love, understanding, and the strength to move forward. In the end, I realized that the true measure of justice wasn't in retribution, but in the ability to forgive, to find peace amid the chaos, and to embrace the possibility of redemption and growth. It was a journey I was proud to have undertaken, one that had taught me the true meaning of resilience and the power of family.
I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by the usual chaos of a school counselor's office, piles of papers, sticky notes clinging to every surface, and the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. My day had been the typical blend of teenage angst and administrative tasks when I noticed the envelope. It was plain, unmarked, and sitting atop the stack of college brochures like it had just appeared out of thin air. Curiosity got the better of me. I tore it open, expecting some mundane request or perhaps another reminder about the upcoming parent-teacher night. Instead, I found a typed letter, the words cold and clinical, yet somehow burning into my brain. Your husband, Grant Lawson, is not who you think he is. He's been unfaithful and involved in illegal activities at his restaurant. Be careful. I read it twice, 3 times, each word slicing deeper into the fabric of my reality. My name is Eliza, and at that moment I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground beneath me crumbling away. I shoved the letter into my bag, my hands trembling. The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, and I mechanically went through the motions of seeing the last few students out. All the while, my mind was racing, trying to piece together the implications of what I had just read. Grant and I had been married for 8 years. He was charming, sure, with that easy smile and those ambitious plans for his restaurant. But lately, there had been late nights, vague explanations, and a growing distance between us that I had chalked up to the pressures of his business. Now I was questioning everything. The drive home was a blur. I parked in our driveway and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like it was waiting for something to happen. I finally got out of the car and walked inside, the letter still tucked away in my bag, a secret burning a hole through the fabric. I needed to talk to someone who could help me make sense of this mess. Ruby, my best friend, was the first person who came to mind. She had a knack for seeing through the bullshit and telling it like it was. I dialed her number, my heart pounding in my chest. Hey, Ruby. Can you come over? I need to talk. Sure thing, Eliza. What's up? You sound off. I'll tell you when you get here. Just please hurry. While I waited, I tried to distract myself by tidying up the living room, but every little thing seemed to remind me of Grant. The framed photo from our wedding, the souvenirs from our travels, even the stupid throw blanket he insisted we needed. It all felt like a lie now. Ruby arrived about 15 minutes later, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. She took one look at me and knew something was seriously wrong. Okay, Spill. What's going on? I handed her the letter, watching her eyes scan the words. Her face shifted from confusion to anger, then to a kind of steely determination that I had always admired about her. Eliza, this is serious. What are you going to do? I don't know, Ruby. I feel like my whole life is a lie. I need to find out if this is true, but I don't even know where to start. First things first, you can't confront Grant until you have proof. If there's one thing I've learned from all those crime shows, it's that you need evidence. Her attempt at humor made me smile, albeit weakly. Yeah, I suppose you're right. Listen, Eliza, whatever happens, I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together. Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. But as much as I appreciated her support, I knew that the path ahead was one I had to walk myself. I had to dig deeper, find the truth, and decide what to do with it. As Ruby left, my mind was already racing with possibilities. Who sent the letter? Why now? And, most importantly, how much of it was true? I didn't have the answers yet, but I was determined to find them. The evening stretched on, each tick of the clock a reminder of the confrontation that loomed ahead. I knew I couldn't ignore this, couldn't pretend everything was fine. Not anymore. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the letter's words echoing in my mind. I knew this was just the beginning, that the truth was out there waiting to be uncovered. And I was going to find it, no matter what it took. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread hanging over me like a storm cloud. Grant was already gone, his side of the bed cold and untouched, a silent reminder of the growing distance between us. I went through the motions of getting ready, but my mind was elsewhere, tangled up in the implications of that letter. At breakfast, I noticed the little things that had become routine: the empty coffee cup he left on the counter, the way he never seemed to be around for breakfast anymore. I tried to shake off the feeling, focusing instead on the day ahead. But the truth was, the letter had planted a seed of doubt that was quickly taking root. When I got to work, I found it hard to concentrate. My students' problems felt trivial compared to the chaos brewing in my own life. During lunch, I called Mabel, Grant's mother. I needed her wisdom, her quiet strength. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and welcoming. "Eliza, dear, how are you?" "I'm managing," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk? I could really use your advice." "Of course, come by after work. I'll make us some tea." The rest of the day dragged on, each minute a reminder of the conversation I was dreading with Grant. By the time I arrived at Mabel's, I was a bundle of nerves. She greeted me with a hug, her presence instantly calming. As we sat in her cozy kitchen, the smell of chamomile filling the air, I felt a bit of the tension ease. Mabel had that effect on people. "I've noticed Grant's been distant," I began, choosing my words carefully. "And I got this letter. Says he's been unfaithful and involved in some shady business. I don't know what to believe." Mabel's eyes softened with understanding. "Eliza, I've seen this before. Grant's father was much the same, charming, ambitious, but always hiding something. Trust your instincts." Her words were both comforting and unsettling. I had always admired Mabel's ability to see through the facade, but hearing her confirm my fears was like a punch to the gut. "Do you think it's true?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know, dear. But I do know that secrets have a way of coming out. You need to be prepared for whatever you find." Her advice echoed in my mind as I drove home. The house was empty, Grant still at the restaurant, or so he said. I sat on the couch, my thoughts a tangled mess, when Ruby called. "Hey, how are you holding up?" she asked, her voice a lifeline. "I'm okay, I think. I talked to Mabel. She told me to trust my instincts." "Smart woman. So, what's your next move?" "I need to confront him, but I want to be sure first. I need proof." "Then let's get you some. I know a guy, Sam Brooks, a private investigator. He's discreet and good at what he does." I hesitated, the idea of spying on Grant feeling both necessary and invasive. But the need for answers outweighed my reservations. "Okay, let's do it." The decision felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders, a step toward clarity in the fog of uncertainty. That evening, when Grant finally came home, I watched him closely, searching for signs of guilt in his easy smile and charming demeanor. "How was your day?" he asked, casually, as if everything was perfectly normal. "Busy, you know how it is," I replied, keeping my tone light, pretending I didn't notice the way he avoided eye contact. As we sat down for dinner, the silence between us was deafening. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead I played along, letting the charade continue for just a little longer. Later, as I lay in bed, Grant asleep beside me, I couldn't help but wonder how well I truly knew the man I had married. Thought was both terrifying and liberating, pushing me further down this path of discovery. The next few days passed in a blur of routine and subterfuge. I met with Sam, who promised to dig into Grant's affairs discreetly. Each day, I juggled the demands of my job with the growing tension at home, the uncertainty gnawing at me like a persistent itch. And then, just when I thought I was beginning to understand the scope of my situation, Mabel called with a revelation that sent my mind spinning. Eliza, there's something you should know. Grant's father, he had another family. I didn't find out until it was too late. I'm telling you this because I see the same patterns in Grant. Her words were a bombshell, adding a new layer of complexity to an already tangled web. Seemed the past was repeating itself, and I was caught in the middle, struggling to break free. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the foundation of my life was more fractured than I had ever imagined. But with each new revelation, my resolve hardened. I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The air felt heavy as I drove to meet Sam Brooks. Private investigator had called earlier, his voice as steady and assured as ever, telling me he had some information. My stomach churned with a mix of dread and anticipation. I had asked for the truth, and now it was time to face it. I met Sam at a small, unassuming cafe on the edge of town. He was already seated at a corner table, a folder in front of him and a cup of black coffee in hand. He nodded as I approached, gesturing for me to sit. "Eliza," he greeted, his tone professional yet kind. "I've got some updates for you." I nodded, trying to keep my nerves in check. "Okay, let's hear it." Sam opened the folder, revealing a series of photographs and documents. "I followed Grant for the past week. He's been meeting with several individuals who have questionable backgrounds. It seems his restaurant is a front for some illegal dealings." My heart sank as I looked at the evidence. There was no denying it now. The man I thought I knew was involved in something dark and dangerous. "And the affairs?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sam hesitated, then handed me a photo. It showed Grant with a woman I didn't recognize, their body language intimate and familiar. "I'm sorry, Eliza. This isn't easy to see." I felt a cold numbness spread through me, a mix of betrayal and anger. I had suspected, but seeing it confirmed was a different kind of pain. "What do I do now?" I asked, more to myself than to Sam. "That's up to you. But whatever you decide, you should be prepared. People like Grant don't always react well when cornered." I nodded, my mind racing. I needed to confront Grant, but I also needed to protect myself. And there was the matter of Mabel's revelation about Grant's father. It was all too much, yet I couldn't ignore it. As I left the cafe, the weight of the truth settled on my shoulders. I drove home, the photographs and documents burning a hole in my bag, a constant reminder of the storm brewing in my life. When I got home, Grant was there, sitting on the couch, his expression unreadable. Tension in the room was palpable as I walked in, my resolve hardening with each step. "Eliza, we need to talk," he said, his voice calm but with an edge of something I couldn't quite place. "Yeah, we do," I replied, setting my bag down with a deliberate thud. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for a clue to my thoughts. "I've been meaning to tell you about some changes at the restaurant," he began, his words careful and measured. "Changes? Is that what you call it?" I shot back, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. He flinched, a crack in his calm facade. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, pulling out the photos and documents, laying them on the table between us. "I know Grant. I know about the affairs, the illegal activities. Everything." His face paled, his eyes darting to the evidence, then back to me. "Eliza, I can explain." "Explain? You've been lying to me, to everyone. How can you possibly explain this?" His charm faltered, replaced by a desperation I hadn't seen before. "I was trying to fix things, to make something of myself. It just got out of hand." "Out of hand?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've put us all at risk, Grant. This isn't just about you anymore." He stood, running a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought I could handle it." "Well, you were wrong," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "And now we have to deal with the consequences." The room fell silent, the weight of our unspoken fears hanging between us. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, the betrayal cutting deeper than I had imagined. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, breaking the tension. I opened it to find Ruby standing there, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Hey, I thought you might need some backup," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her presence was a balm, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. Grant looked between us, realizing that the facade he had carefully constructed was crumbling, and there was no going back. As the evening wore on, the reality of the situation settled in. I knew the path ahead was fraught with challenges, but I also knew I had the strength to face them. This was about more than just uncovering the truth. It was about reclaiming my life, my sense of justice. And as I stood there, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered reality, I felt a flicker of hope. This was just the beginning, and I was ready to see it through to the end. The days following my confrontation with Grant felt like I was living in a haze. Each morning, I woke up hoping it had all been a nightmare, only to find the evidence staring back at me from its hiding place in my closet. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, urging me to make a decision. One afternoon, as I sat in my office at the school, my phone buzzed with a message from Mabel. "Can we talk?" "It's important," it read. Her words sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I quickly replied, arranging to meet her at her house after work. When I arrived, Mabel was waiting for me on the porch, her expression serious yet welcoming. She led me inside, and we settled into the living room, the familiar comfort of her home providing a small respite from the chaos of my thoughts. "Eliza, I've been thinking about everything," she began, her voice gentle yet firm. "There's something else I need to tell you." I braced myself, knowing that whatever she was about to reveal could change everything once again. "Grant's father wasn't just deceitful with his affairs," Mabel continued, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and resolve. "He was involved in some very dangerous circles. I didn't know until it was too late, and I fear Grant may have followed in his footsteps more closely than I realized." Her words hit me like a tidal wave, the implications crashing over me. The web of lies and deceit was far deeper than I had imagined, and it seemed Grant was entangled in it more than I could have known. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. "I hoped it wasn't true," Mabel admitted, her eyes downcast. "But seeing how things have unfolded, I can't ignore it any longer. I'm telling you now because I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did." Her confession was both a warning and a plea, urging me to take action before it was too late. I nodded, my mind racing with the possibilities. I needed to protect myself and my future, but how could I do that when the ground beneath me kept shifting? As I left Mabel's house, my phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Ruby. "Hey, I've got something you need to see," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. "Meet me at the park." I agreed, curiosity and apprehension battling within me. When I arrived, Ruby was already there, pacing near the swings, her camera bag slung over her shoulder. "What's going on?" I asked, joining her. She handed me her camera, showing me a series of photos she had taken over the past few days. They showed Grant meeting with a group of men outside his restaurant, their expressions serious and their gestures animated. "I've been keeping an eye on him," Ruby explained, her voice low. "These guys aren't your typical business partners. Something's definitely up." I studied the photos, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. It was clear that whatever Grant was involved in, it was bigger than I had anticipated. "Thank you, Ruby," I said, feeling a surge of gratitude for her loyalty and determination. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "We're in this together, Eliza," she replied, her eyes fierce with determination. "Now, what's the plan?" Paused, considering my options. I needed to confront Grant again, but this time with a clearer understanding of the stakes. And I needed to make sure I was protected both physically and legally. As I sat in the park watching the children play, I felt a shift within me. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring a safe future for myself and the child I might one day have. The thought brought a sense of clarity, a determination to see this through to the end. That evening, I returned home to find Grant waiting for me, his expression guarded. Tension between us crackled like static electricity, unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "About what?" he replied, his tone defensive. "About the men you've been meeting," I said, watching his reaction closely. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps, or maybe realization that his secrets were unraveling. "Eliza, it's not what you think," he began, but I cut him off. "Then tell me what it is, Grant. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're in way over your head." He hesitated, the silence stretching between us before finally speaking. "I was trying to help the business, to make it successful. But things got complicated." "Complicated?" echoed, incredulous. "Grant, you're putting us all at risk. This isn't just about you anymore." Power dynamics between us had shifted, and for the first time I saw a glimpse of vulnerability in his eyes. It was a small victory, but it fueled my resolve to keep pushing forward, to uncover the full extent of his deceit and protect the life I was fighting to reclaim. The days blurred together as I navigated the chaos Grant had brought into our lives. My mind was a whirlwind of plans and fears, each day a new test of my resolve. Mabel and I had begun documenting everything, a paper trail of deceit and betrayal that we hoped would protect us. But with each passing day, the stakes seemed to rise, the shadows of Grant's actions growing longer and more menacing. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the documents Mabel and I had gathered, Grant walked in. His presence filled the room, an unspoken tension crackling between us. I could feel his gaze on me, the weight of his scrutiny heavy on my shoulders. "Eliza, we need to talk," he said, his voice a mix of frustration and something else, something darker. I looked up, meeting his eyes with a steady gaze. "About what, Grant?" "The lies or the danger you've put us in." He flinched, a flicker of something like guilt crossing his features. "I'm trying to fix it, you know. I'm doing everything I can." "Are you?" I challenged, standing up and facing him. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're digging us deeper." Grant's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek. "You don't understand, Eliza. It's not that simple." "Then make me understand," I replied, my voice rising. "Because all I see are secrets and lies." The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between his ambition and the reality he had created. It was a moment of vulnerability, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by the defensive mask he wore so well. "I'm handling it," he insisted, his tone firm, but I could hear the cracks forming beneath it. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, slicing through the tension like a knife. I moved to answer it, finding Ruby on the other side, her expression urgent. "Eliza, we need to talk," she said, glancing past me to where Grant stood. "Now?" I nodded, stepping outside with her, the cool evening air a welcome relief from the suffocating tension inside. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I've been digging deeper," Ruby said, her voice low and serious. "And I found something big. Grant's business isn't just a front, it's tied to a network of money laundering. This is serious, Eliza." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, the implications spinning through my mind. This was bigger than I had imagined, the danger more immediate and real. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "We need to act fast," Ruby replied, her determination unwavering. "You have to get out of there, Eliza." "It's not safe." I nodded, the decision crystallizing in my mind. I couldn't stay, not with the threat looming over us. But leaving meant accepting the end of everything I had built with Grant, the life we had shared unraveling like a frayed thread. As I re-entered the house, the gravity of the situation settled over me like a shroud. Grant was still in the kitchen, his back to me as he stared out the window. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. He turned, surprise and disbelief etched on his face. "What?" "You can't just—" "I can and I will," I interrupted, my resolve firm. "I have to protect myself, Grant." I have to protect our future. His expression shifted, a mix of anger and desperation. Eliza, please. I can fix this. No, you can't, I replied, my heart aching with the truth of it. You've made your choices, and now I have to make mine. The silence that followed was heavy, the finality of my words hanging in the air. I turned away, moving to gather my things, each step a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. As I packed a bag, my mind raced with the possibilities, the uncertainty of the future looming large. But beneath the fear and doubt, there was a flicker of hope, a belief that I could rebuild, that I could find a way forward. With one last look at the home we had shared, I stepped out into the night, the path ahead uncertain but necessary. This was about more than revenge or justice. It was about reclaiming my life, my sense of self, and forging a new path in the face of betrayal. As I drove away, the weight of the past slowly lifted, replaced by a newfound determination. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had the strength to face it, to rise above the chaos and carve out a new beginning. I stood in the dimly lit hallway of Mabel's house, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. I had left Grant and everything that tied me to him, but the sense of relief I'd hoped for hadn't come. Instead, I felt adrift, the future an uncertain blur. Mabel sat across from me, her presence a comforting constant in the chaos. You did the right thing, Eliza, she said softly, her voice a balm to my frayed nerves. I know, I replied, trying to believe it, but doubt lingered like a shadow. It's just, what now? We keep moving forward, Mabel said, her resolve unwavering. We protect what's left and rebuild. Her words were reassuring, but the path ahead seemed impossibly daunting. As if sensing my hesitation, Mabel reached for my hand, her grip firm and grounding. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a message from Sam Brooks. Need to see you. Urgent. The words sent a shiver of apprehension through me. I nodded to Mabel and left to meet him, my mind racing with possibilities. Sam was waiting at the cafe, his expression serious. Eliza, I've uncovered more about Grant's dealings, he said without preamble. It's worse than we thought. He's deeper into this network than anyone realized. The news hit me like a physical blow, the implications spiraling through my mind. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely steady. It means you're in more danger than we anticipated. These people don't take kindly to loose ends, Sam explained, his tone grave. I felt the room spin, the walls closing in. The life I'd known was slipping away, replaced by a nightmare I couldn't wake from. What do I do? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. You need to lie low, stay out of sight until things settle, Sam advised. And be prepared for anything. I nodded, the reality of my situation settling over me like a shroud. I was in over my head, and the way out seemed impossibly far. As I left the cafe, Ruby called, her voice a lifeline in the storm. Eliza, I've got a place you can stay. It's safe, and no one will find you there. Thank you, Ruby, I said, my gratitude genuine. I'll head there now. The drive to the safe house was a blur, my mind replaying Sam's warning over and over. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that danger lurked around every corner. By the time I arrived, my nerves were frayed, exhaustion tugging at my edges. The safe house was small and unassuming, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. Ruby had left the key under the mat, and as I stepped inside, the silence enveloped me. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of my recent days, but the solitude was a balm I desperately needed. As I settled in, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. The lies, the danger, the uncertainty of the future. It was all too much. I sank onto the couch, my body trembling with the effort of holding it together. The night stretched on, each tick of the clock a reminder of the precariousness of my situation. I was alone, isolated from the life I had known, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead was suffocating. Then, just as I thought I had reached my breaking point, the phone rang. It was Grant, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. Eliza, you need to come back. We can fix this. I felt a surge of anger, the audacity of his words igniting something within me. Fix this? You've put us all in danger, Grant. There's no fixing that. You don't understand, he insisted, his voice rising. I can make it right. No, you can't, I replied, my voice firm. I'm done, Grant. I'm done with the lies and the danger. The silence on the line was heavy, the finality of my words hanging between us. I hung up, the decision solidifying within me. I couldn't go back, not now. But even as I resolved to move forward, a new fear took root. If Grant couldn't fix this, what would happen next? The uncertainty was a constant companion, whispering fears I couldn't ignore. As the night deepened, I felt the weight of my choices, the path ahead fraught with danger and doubt. But beneath it all, there was a flicker of hope, a belief that I could rise above the chaos, that I could reclaim my life. In the quiet of the safe house, I realized that this was my lowest point, but it was also a turning point. I could let the darkness consume me, or I could fight my way back into the light. And as I lay there, the decision was clear. I would fight. For myself, for my future, and for the life I was determined to rebuild. The safe house was quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of a clock echoing through the dimly lit rooms. I sat at the small kitchen table, the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on me like a physical force. I knew it was time to face Grant one last time, to put an end to the tangled web of lies and deceit that had ensnared us both. The phone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the silence. I picked it up, my heart pounding in my chest. It was Grant, his voice taut with desperation. Eliza, we need to talk. Face to face. Why? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. So you can spin more lies? No, he replied, a hint of vulnerability in his tone. I need to explain. Meet me at the restaurant. Please. I hesitated, the thought of seeing him again filling me with a mix of dread and resolve. But I knew I had to do this, to confront him with everything I had learned. Fine, I said, my voice firm. But this is it, Grant. No more games. The drive to the restaurant was tense, my mind a whirlwind of possibilities. I parked a block away, the evening air cool against my skin as I approached the building. The restaurant loomed ahead, its lights casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Inside, the place was empty, the chairs stacked on tables, the air thick with the smell of cleaning products. Grant stood near the bar, his posture tense, eyes shadowed with something I couldn't quite read. Eliza, he said, his voice a mix of relief and apprehension. Thank you for coming. Get to the point, Grant, I replied, crossing my arms to keep from trembling. I'm tired of your half-truths. He nodded, a flicker of something like regret crossing his features. I messed up, Eliza. I got in over my head. But it was never supposed to be like this. Like what? I challenged, stepping closer. A front for illegal activities? A lie. I thought I could control it, he admitted, his voice cracking. I wanted to give us everything, but I lost sight of what mattered. His words hung in the air, a confession that was both too late and too little. I felt a surge of anger, the betrayal cutting deeper than I'd expected. And the affairs? I asked, my voice cold. Were they part of your plan too? Grant flinched, his eyes dropping to the floor. I was stupid. I thought I needed more, but it was never real. I shook my head, disbelief mingling with frustration. You risked everything for nothing, Grant. You put us all in danger. I know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I can fix it. I just need time. Time, echoed incredulous. You've had time and look where we are. The silence stretched between us, the weight of our choices a chasm neither of us could cross. I could see the desperation in his eyes, the fear of losing everything he'd built, but it was too late for that now. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye, a folder on the bar, its contents spilling out. I picked it up, flipping through the pages, my heart sinking as I realized what it was. Evidence, meticulously documented, of Grant's dealings and the network he was entangled in. What is this? I demanded, holding up the folder. It's everything, Grant replied, his voice resigned. I was going to turn it over to make things right. I studied him, searching for the truth in his eyes. For the first time, I saw the man he used to be, the one I had fallen in love with, buried beneath layers of ambition and insecurity. "Why now?" I asked, my voice softer, the anger giving way to a weary sadness. "Because I'm tired, Eliza," he said, his shoulders slumping. "Tired of running, of hiding. I want to end this." His confession was unexpected, a twist I hadn't anticipated. I felt a flicker of hope, tempered by the reality of our situation. "Then do it," I said, handing him the folder. "Turn it over and maybe we can find a way out of this mess." Grant nodded, taking the folder with a determined expression. "I will. I promise." As I left the restaurant, the weight of the confrontation lifted slightly, replaced by a cautious optimism. The resolution wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a step towards reclaiming the life we had lost. The themes of justice and redemption had brought us to this point, and as I walked into the night, I realized that the path ahead was still uncertain. But it was one I was ready to face. Confrontation had tested us both, but it had also offered a chance for healing, a chance to rebuild from the ashes of our mistakes. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Mabel's living room, casting soft patterns across the floor. I sat with her, a cup of tea warming my hands, the air between us filled with a quiet sense of relief. It had been a few weeks since the confrontation with Grant, and though the path ahead was still uncertain, there was a newfound peace in knowing the worst was behind us. Mabel looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of pride and understanding. "You've come a long way, Eliza," she said softly, her words carrying the weight of our shared journey. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, meaning every word. Her support had been a lifeline, guiding me through the storm. We sat in comfortable silence, the bond between us stronger than ever. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to find strength in the face of adversity. As I sipped my tea, my thoughts drifted to Grant. He had turned over the evidence, and the authorities were now untangling the web he had woven. It was a step towards redemption, a chance for him to make amends, even if it meant facing the consequences of his actions. A knock at the door broke the quiet, and Ruby entered, her presence a burst of energy and warmth. "I brought something for you," she said, handing me a small, wrapped package. I opened it to find a photo album, the pages filled with memories of happier times. It was a reminder of the life I had built, the moments of joy and love that were still worth cherishing. "Thank you, Ruby," I said, touched by her gesture. "This means a lot." "We've been through a lot, but I know you'll come out stronger," she replied, her confidence in me unwavering. As the day unfolded, I felt a sense of closure settling over me. The journey had been tumultuous, but it had also been transformative. I had faced my fears, confronted the truth, and emerged with a clearer sense of who I was and what I wanted. Later, as the afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself alone in the garden, the cool breeze a gentle reminder of the world's beauty. I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling a flutter of movement, a reminder of the life growing within me. In that moment, I realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter. The themes of justice and protection had guided me through the darkness, and now they would light the way forward. I was no longer defined by the chaos of the past, but by the hope of the future. As I stood there, a lingering question tugged at the edges of my mind. Would Grant truly change? Could he find redemption in the choices he had made? It was a question that would remain unanswered, a reminder that life's complexities often defy simple resolutions. But I knew that whatever happened, I had the strength to face it. I had learned to trust myself, to find courage in vulnerability, and to embrace the unknown with open arms. The journey had tested me in ways I never expected, but it had also revealed a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. And as I looked out at the world, I felt a deep sense of peace, a certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. With a final glance at the setting sun, I turned and walked back inside, ready to embrace whatever came next. Past was behind me, and the future was a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of hope and possibility.